I'm Jeff Gray, CEO of Glue Networks, and thank you very much for having us here today.
I'm Chris Marquette. I'm an independent network consultant.
Matt Oswald, network engineer.
Ethan Banks, network engineer.
Ed Henry, network engineer.
Pete Welcher, network consultant with Chesapeake Net Craftsman, Cisco Gold Partner.
Gideon Tim, network engineer.
Great, so we're here to talk a little bit about software-defined networks and specifically intelligent WAN orchestration. So really pleased that we're here and you guys are available for us to go through our vision as well as what we're doing today. And usually when you think about software-defined networks, there's a lot of POCs, there's a lot of pilots, there's a lot of PowerPoints. And the first thing that I wanted to share is that Glue is in global production in Fortune 500, Fortune 100 customers. Our networks have been deployed and up for a number of years now, and we've been working behind the scenes to really create the engine and get into production networks before we really move forward with marketing and a lot of the hype and things like that. So a couple points. We did make Gartner Cool Vendor in 2013. We also were recognized as helping drive the software-defined WAN use case as a top 3 use case out of 11 at the last ONUG as one of the top areas that IT sees spending and reducing cost as it relates to software-defined networking. And then the third point is that we're live on Cisco's global price list, and 14,000 account managers and SEs can retire quota, as well as Cisco channel partners. So the other point is that the WAN market is a $120 billion market a year, according to Gartner, and it's still built manually. There's been a lot of automation and orchestration within the data center environment, which has been driven by expensive CapEx and OpEx. So across the globe, you've had enterprises that have multiple data centers, 10, 20, 30, that have now been consolidated into 3 or 4 across the globe. And now there's a bottleneck on legacy WANs that enterprises need to get that content back out from data centers out to highly distributed locations where people actually work and consume applications. And so network vendors have created a lot of advanced feature sets and architectures, but since they're manually built, they're very difficult and complex to set up, to lifecycle manage, to tune. And especially if you build a WAN manually, then traditionally you wouldn't want to touch a WAN. You'd leave it alone, don't want to break it. Well, as it relates to the future, there needs to be more programmability in the WAN. If a data center application, let's say SAP, wants to call for priority across the WAN for closing books at the end of the quarter, but the enterprise happens to have multiple voice calls, telepresence calls, you need a traffic cop, you need an orchestration engine to be able to handshake with a data center controller to say, SAP, you can't have top priority, you can have third priority, but then once the telepresence calls or voice calls are over, then we can ratchet you up and then dial you back down over time. We're in New York today, and in the morning there's 5 lanes going into the Lincoln Tunnel and 1 coming out. And later in the day, the traffic patterns shift. So our belief is that the WAN also needs to get much more programmatic and to be able to respond to new traffic patterns and to use your bandwidth much more efficiently. The old way of doing this from a manual build perspective is that network engineers would create all the configurations, put in all the backend infrastructure, leave wildcards, and attempt to fill in those wildcards, and then send a flat file down to a router, reboot the router, and hope everything connects. It's really a load and pray type of approach. Many times the configs are on engineers' hard drives or the scripts or that have been built to help a little bit, but there's never been true orchestration or automation within the wide area network. So what Glue has created is an intelligent WAN orchestration engine. You can think of it as an expert system that is architecturally aware, that allows for both provisioning as well as change management of the wide area network. It allows you to provision, do a pre-vision, provision, and post-vision your WAN. And the way that it does it is you set up your policies and it's able to reach out and create a dialogue with the router, with the networking device, and build up the network layer by layer with error checking and self-healing. So it's real time, it's dynamic, and the reason why we do that is now you have an expert system that's able to speak directly to the devices, or for example, to Cisco's APIC Enterprise Module Controller to be able to manipulate the network on the fly. And so this is novel in terms of a new way to build up networks, but also to tune and change manage networks moving forward. So the concept is take out the complexity, allow for automated build, allow network engineers to use their knowledge without being mired in the granularity of having to manually change networks constantly. And so, happy to talk more about this, and happy to answer questions, or we can go straight into a demo and then go for questions.
So the play here is not network virtualization, it is orchestration of your existing network assets, leveraging the technology you're already using, but just automating these things.
That is correct. Rather than reinventing the wheel or rediscovering fire and creating our own networking stack, we decided not to do that. We decided to create an orchestration layer on top of years and years of R&D as it relates to feature sets within iOS.
So let's say I've got a large WAN distributed, and I've got 300 offices hanging off of that, and I want Office 1 to talk to Office 2, but not to Office 3. Can Glue do a policy that would help with that sort of connectivity?
Absolutely. Either hub and spoke or spoke to spoke. And as traffic patterns are emerging, there's a lot more need for direct spoke to spoke or peer-to-peer connectivity, and we can absolutely do that.
Okay, so now I want to do some kind of compliance, PCI or HIPAA or whatever it might be, and I need some traffic to be encrypted as it goes between these two endpoints and some to not be encrypted. Can I do that sort of a policy?
So all traffic is encrypted. Of course, you can run it in clear. We've never done that before in any network, so it's a very, very secure environment. The head ends are located on an enterprise data center, and then there's routers at every single branch. The way that the engine talks to every router is also encrypted. There's two-factor authentication, radius, etc. And the Glue engine's not in the data stream. So all of the traffic on the enterprise is contained within the enterprise network between their head ends and their CPEs.
So the use case for having some data streams be not encrypted is if you've already got an encrypted data stream, say Microsoft Link, voice communication that's already encrypted, then you don't want to stick that into another encrypted tunnel because you can have quality issues there, is the specific scenario I happen to be dealing with.
So there is, as it relates to local breakout and emerging traffic patterns where not everything will go back to the data center, where those specific applications are housed and want to break out locally to a SaaS environment, whitelisting, local breakout is absolutely supported, which also helps with that use case.
The part of the product that intrigues me is I've been seeing a lot of customers over the years dealing with mixes of MPLS and other backdoor networks and redistribution and all sorts of other kludges to make that work. And they're finding it challenging. And when I was upstairs earlier this morning, I asked about list prices, not having looked at the Cisco price list. And let me just say I'm impressed. I think compared to the cost of a network technician putting in the time, it sounds like a great price point. Very compelling case. So.
Thank you. We run an ROI for every customer, and there's two elements to that ROI. One is on transport cost, and we see, every single one of our customers needs 5 to 10x the bandwidth, but they don't have 5 to 10x the budget to just throw at more MPLS and more private lines. So the transport cost reduction is very, very attractive to enterprises. As it relates to the ROI of self-build, you can absolutely self-build an architecture. The feature sets exist. However, bringing orchestration to something that wasn't automated in the past is very attractive as it relates to the business being more agile. There's definitely cost reduction, but we're not looking at eliminating any networking jobs. IT is, they're maxed out. There's more to do than they can, but we also look at agility and speed of IT being able to respond to lines of business. And I very much appreciate your comment.
Apropos of cattle versus cats, what I'm seeing is that a lot of organizations are finding that cat herds are thin on the ground and they can't deal with the one-off wide area solutions that they've built over the past. They're just unsustainable. And so automating and getting some cookie cutter approach are both wins. Now the hardball question is, if you're encrypting stuff, do you encrypt over MPLS?
So of course we can encrypt over MPLS.
You don't have to?
We don't have to, however, and we can automate MPLS. However, in order for performance routing to work very well, then of course we would encrypt and run DMVPN over MPLS as well as Internet for hybrid WAN.
Although you could run PFR natively, so to speak. Related question to the encryption is I've seen customers that are finding getting surprised when they increase the bandwidth and exceed the encryption capability of the edge device. Do you do any, or have you considered doing any sanity checking, if you will, to alert the customer that, hey, maybe you don't want to take your 3945 router and try to do 500 megabits per second of encrypted traffic?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we do. First of all, in a design session, we look at traffic patterns, we look at applications, and we have recommendations as it relates to sizes of head ends as well as edge routers. Of course, traffic will continue to rise, applications will become more bandwidth hungry over time. And so we do health monitoring and checking to ensure that no customer is running out of memory or CPU or encryption offload capability. So absolutely.
It would be easy to build in a lookup table that says if you're doing this much, then alert, because the
Absolutely.
edge system.
Yes.
Yeah.
A non-trivial proportion of my network is mobile routers. And I'm curious to hear some of the use cases and what people have done with the mobile features with your platform.
So a lot of customers are using 3G, 4G, and we'll see that continue to rise. So there's a variety of applications as it relates to fleets, buses, utilities, things like this, where 4G, you can have both, a 4G mobile router capability, and this works just the same as long as the bandwidth is there. Or you could have private lines or internet as well as 4G capability.
But are you doing stuff with location and?
We do actually have a security feature that is Geo Location Aware that we launched at Cisco Live back in Orlando. And to our knowledge, it's the first security feature where wherever you have a device plugged in, and there's a mashup as it relates to geolocation topology, either wireless triangulation or GPS, that if that device moves a certain distance, that we immediately revoke the certificate and not allow that device to call home or talk to the corporate network, but it does send a beacon back so that you can alert the authorities and actually recover the device. And we saw a need for that in a few use cases where companies were moving from private lines to a lot of internet lines, and they wanted to make sure that someone didn't remove a router and plug it in rogue. And so we went ahead and developed that feature.
You're doing geolocation with Wi-Fi as well as the inbuilt GPS?
Either is possible.
Cool.
So can you leverage that geolocation ability to do data center load balancing? I want my West Coast people to land here and East Coast.
We are not at that stage yet. This is more of a security feature, but as it relates to making sure there's no asymmetric routing and making sure that we've got HA spread between two data centers is something that we pre-plan, and we have HA groups that are either by policy or by geo as it relates to where those branch routers terminate into different data centers. And so all of those policies and all of the routing is dynamic, and we're able to do that, just not with the geolocation feature at this point.
So Glue is now about orchestrating routers, and obviously there's a strong relationship with Cisco here. What about endpoints? So say I've got an application on an iPad that I need to connect into my network. I don't know where that iPad is. Is there anything Glue can do there?
So as it relates to managing mobile devices, that's not in our charter at this point. We could go there, but there's a very large market as it relates to wide area networks and enterprise architectures. In terms of security policies, customers are in charge of their own AAA. They can run ICE or other security management capabilities so that when an endpoint looks to get access to the network, that they would be given that security policy, and another system runs that posture. But we're fully integrated with that capability.
Gotcha.
How does the interaction with the routers work? I mean, you have a bullet point on there about southbound APIs, the way you interact with routers. But since you're, I guess targeted specifically at Cisco, at least for the time being, how does that work?
So we talk to the devices in a variety of manners. We have to do it the hard way today. Later, it'll become a bit easier for us through Cisco's APIC Enterprise module, which gives us a more robust API to be able to manipulate the network on the fly. Today,
Hard way, do you mean SNMP, SSH, those?
you got it. So CLI, SNMP, we do leverage some 1PK capabilities. We tickle, we EEM the box. So we're actually touching the box in 5 ways. As more and more features get rolled into the APIC Enterprise module, it gives us a more stable way to be able to manipulate the fabric. And I think the key point here is that Glue is much more at the orchestration level, and we view the controller more like a very talented violinist or a trumpeter or a trombonist. So the better the controller gets, the better for us. We can have a controller in each geo, and we both can roll out and provision the network through error checking and self-healing with all those feature sets. We can deploy a controller. We can leverage the controller to twist the knobs and orchestrate. And we think of the controller as like a heart and nervous system, and Glue's the brain. Either you can do it manually, and you can twist the knobs and roll out the controller. Otherwise, you can use Glue to tie into your workflows.
So if we were to look at a traditional SDN diagram, if you will, where there's northbound a controller in the middle and southbound, Glue, if someone had deployed a controller, Glue would be northbound talking to the controller.
That is absolutely correct. Yeah. And it's probably going to be a mix over time as well, because to be able to roll out the network with all the different features to get it running, a lot of SDN assumes that the network is in place, and then you put in a controller and then twist the knobs on the controller or set it up with your workflows. Well, we believe that SDN is kind of like GPS. That GPS tells your car where to go, but for GPS to work really well, you need to have roads that are built, you need to have roads that are monitored and maintained. And that's really the role of Glue, to allow SDN to work more efficiently.
So what about outside of Cisco? Is there any plans on, because there's a lot of WAN devices out there that aren't Cisco?
Correct. So Cisco at this point has 86% market share on the WAN side, and we have our work cut out for us to be able to accommodate all of the features as it relates to Cisco boxes in the WAN. And so that's really our focus at this point in time.
So your logic is so many people have got Cisco gear out there, why bother with anybody else? Because we can't even get all the Cisco features running at this point.
So we're doing pretty well.
I don't mean to,
but
that came out more negative than I meant it, but yeah.
But that is absolutely the strategy. We've got a very close relationship with Cisco. It's very synergistic with their SDN strategy. Multi-million dollars being booked between Glue and Cisco as it relates to these architectures, and that's our focus. Correct.
Can you walk through the zero-touch provisioning? Like, what does that look like? Router fresh from the carton.
That's what I was going to ask.
Sure, absolutely. So we're tied in with a variety.
Specifically, do I have to order the router a certain way?
There are SKUs that there's a CVO SKU that you can order.
I'm familiar with this.
And so that allows for the outside interface to be enabled as well as DHCP, nothing else in the box. So that's one way. Okay, and we have a Java applet that sits on a laptop called First Connect, and we're tied in with channel partners' logistics systems. So when they order the boxes, then the serial numbers are automatically put into Glue's engine, and then they're shipped out to that address and that user, and they can click on an email, and then our engine is able to log in via an applet, bootstrap the box, and the box is able to call home, and then the Glue engine engages and then builds up the network layer by layer. That's option number one. Option number two is that we have a bootstrap config, which is secure specific to that box and to the engine, and you can boot the box via USB, so there's no special SKU that needs to be ordered, and then it calls home, and then we roll out. Option number three is, and we demoed at Cisco Live Milan at the end of January, is a plug and play agent, and this will be generally available later this year from Cisco. And there's a plug and play agent that's able to call back and engage the engine, and that's native, and that's the approach that doesn't need any extras if
that thing is on the router when it ships?
That is correct. Within iOS, and so we were demonstrating that in Milan, and we'll be demonstrating it again.
Is that configured specifically, like by Cisco Manufacturing for this customer, or? How does it know where to go?
So I'll actually show that to you in the demo. And today we're using it for switches, and then we intercept that call, and then we can go ahead and build up a config specific to a switch. And then there's some other things that we'll be able to share a little bit later at Cisco Live San Francisco of exactly how that's going to work on a per customer basis.
In the USB scenario, is it just plug a USB flash disk into the router?
Correct.
And no blue cables?
No blue cables.
Correct.
So this plug and play is different than the POAP auto provisioning process?
It is different, and it's not released yet, but will be released in GA soon. But it's similar. Yeah. Okay, I'm going ahead and logging into our portal, and I'm going to go ahead to our runtime, which is our new UI. And at this point in time, I'm also going to log into my mobile device. And
Quick question.
Yep.
Is this in the cloud or is this in my enterprise?
This today is in the cloud. These head ends, there's head end number 1 and head end number 2, which are located on the enterprise. And then Glue securely interacts with all of those devices, but is not in the data stream. Okay, let me make sure I can log into the mobile device, mobile app. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys 3 things today. And the first is the plug and play provisioning as it relates to switches. Second is the integration with the Cisco APIC Enterprise Module Controller and how Glue is able to interact with that. And then the third is QoS as well as PFR. And so the very first thing I'm going to do is find the demo node, and you can see I'm typing in Cisco. This node went blue, for example, and so that's the demo node. So let me go ahead and click on that. So one of the key things that I want to show is that all of these devices are managed by Glueware, where you have the Glue badge. On this side, anything that does not have a Glue badge on it and is blue as it relates to gray is we're getting topology and discovery information from the Cisco APIC Enterprise Module. And so today we're getting discovery and topology information. As with more features that are rolled in, then we'll be able to leverage the APIC Enterprise Module Controller for many more things. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and make a plug and play call, and I'm going to go ahead and add a switch. So I've just hit add a switch, and at this point you can see a switch that has popped up. And because it's in gray, it's not managed by Glueware. So you can go ahead and see it's a non-Glueware controlled device. Switch, here's the serial number, network ID. When we look at the provisioning status of it, then I'm going to go ahead and provision the switch. So at this point in time, I'm going to click provision switch, and you'll see our engine engage from the cloud through the head end, and going through the CP and then building up a configuration as it relates to the switch layer by layer with error checking and self-healing.
Placeholder for a switch, or is that an actual piece of hardware that somehow you pulled into the environment?
So we have both. This is a virtualized switch as it relates to this specific demo, but we made a plug and play call, and what I was showing before is that there was a plug and play call going to a router that we controlled. We were intercepting that call, and then we notified the engine that there's a plug and play call happening, and it notified the engine that there's a switch that is ready to be provisioned. If it had that particular policy, then we can go ahead and deploy it as I shared here. Now I'm going to activate it, so you'll see success, and then I will go ahead and it will bump. And now at this point in time, if I want to deprovision the switch, then I can revoke the certificate and immediately wipe it out of the system. So I'm hitting remove switch, success, and at this point that switch will disappear. So that is the switch side of things. While I was looking at the demo, I also shared that anything that was badged is, it's receiving not all of the information because we're not managing that device yet. We're getting that information from the APIC Enterprise Module. So the next thing I'll show is PFR. So let me go ahead and move to the PFR demo. And this is our PFR node, which is connected both to enterprise data center number 1 as well as 2. And now that I've clicked on this device, you can see that it is an 881. You can see it's behind NAT. You can see it's routable, etc. QoS information as it relates to QoS model. So a 12-class QoS model where you have voice, you have interactive video, and you have critical data. And so when I go down here, let me just get I can look at recent activity. I can look at monitoring, threshold violations. I can also look at network congestions. And so based upon this QoS model that we've set up, I'm now going to look at PFR. And so we've set watermarks as it relates to jitter, packet loss, delay. In policy is network A, out of policy is network B. So you've got voice, you've got video conferencing, you've got critical data. And I could go into the guts of this in more detail, but the main point here is that I'm going to force a threshold violation right now, and you have voice that is currently running over network A. Now I'm going to go ahead and force the threshold violation, and you can see that voice is now moved over to network B, whereas video conferencing as well as critical data from the finance side is still running over network A. And it'll constantly monitor the integrity of that circuit and that path. And then when it's ready, I've just forced the threshold violation back. It will move back over to network A. And so that concludes the demo of plug and play, zero touch provisioning, mashup with the APIC Enterprise module as well as PFR.
PFR without a rocket scientist on staff.
That's correct. And I also want to mention that we automate PFR v2, and v3 will be available in the future, but this is PFR v2 that's in millions and millions of routers out there today. So.
And presumably you'll be doing v3 once it's...
Absolutely.
What about the ingress path optimization? That, like for example, it was addressed by LIPS, right? I have 2 data center, I have a WAN, a hospital user coming in, but the two data center we have interconnect with OTV, for example, and then the VM migrated from one part to another. You're able to do the ingress optimization based on availability of the VM in data center B, move from data center A to data center B. So as soon as we start to integrate on the data center controller side, the answer is absolutely. Today, you're able to control all of the routing as it relates to a data center with head ends out to every edge device. Today, we're not automating any VMs within the data center, but the idea is that there's been so much focus on that we'd rather handshake and be able to get control instructions and then be able to use our own brain within the engine to be able to say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and route over this circuit because I'm not going to break the WAN. So the answer is in the very near future, yes. Today, it's not available at this point in time.
I've got one question. Circuits are still left to the customer to obtain the circuits?
Yes, we are software only. And so a customer would be able to procure their own circuits. They would buy hardware through their channel partner of choice, and they would simply buy glue licenses on a 12-month or a 36-month SKU according to packs of nodes. Also, there's a lot of customers that would like a service provider or channel partner to put an SLA as it relates to managed services around that. And so we have plenty of customers today that have decided to buy glue through a partner or service provider, and then that partner or service provider is able to manage that network for them.
Any difficulty with the cloud services router? Is that a unique play, or is it just another router to glue?
For us, it's another router, whether it's in a VM or whether it's an aluminum box. It needs to be configured, it needs to be lifecycle managed, it needs to be tuned. So we automate CSRs today. So that helps with both data center, with the customer's own data center, as well as being able to put CSRs in public clouds as well. Yeah. Yep.
What about iOS XR? Are you guys?
iOS XE, iOS, and I have lost all of my very granular focus in the last year or so. But I'll happily get you in touch with some of our smarter guys to answer all the different iOS versions. We keep a floating window of 7 versions of iOS whitelisted, where we've baked and we've gone through the architectures in detail, and we make sure that all the different feature sets within all of the iOS versions and architectures work before we push them out the door. We do allow customizability, but the more that you customize the architectures, then the more inner working of all the features there will be.
What about OTV?
That's outside the scope of Glue at this point. Yeah.